Interestingly, a cozy does not refer to sitting in front of a fire sipping hot chocolate, being nice and cozy. It refers to the crocheted or quilted or knit doily thing like you see here that covers a teapot to help keep the water hot. It's a kind of a nod to Agatha Christie, who invented the subgenre of a cozy. I think an important point about the term cozy is that that doesn't imply in any way that they are silly or dumbing it down or anything of that ilk. They can be quite literary. They can be quite erudite. They can be quite serious. For example, if you think of a typical Agatha Christie plot, you think of an old woman lying in her bed, knowing she's dying, knowing she's been poisoned, surrounded by the only people who have access to her, her children, her trusted attorney, her much-loved cousin who served as her companion for 25 years. Whew, does the word cozy seem apt? Not really, right? So think of it as helping a publisher understand what you're writing, but don't think of it as limiting in any way once you understand the conventions of the genre. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. When we analyze a cozy, you need to be aware that readers have very particular expectations. When they pick up a book labeled as a cozy, they want to read a very comfortable and familiar book. So let's take a look in detail at what we're talking about. The sleuth is almost always an amateur. And that doesn't necessarily mean the person can't have a law enforcement background. They could be retired, like Hercule Poirot, for example. But usually they're the postmistress, or it's the woman who owns a catering company, my gal, who's an antique appraiser. The sleuth is usually an amateur. They must have an organic reason to be involved with murder. That's a requirement. For example, a vet. A veterinarian is not a trained detective, but you know what? When you think about it, he or she is, right? They're trained in investigating, in analyzing symptoms, and reaching a conclusion about what's wrong with the animal. We have an organic reason to be out and about a lot. We're going to farms. How about a vet that deals with big animals in Iowa or Ohio or Pennsylvania, and therefore is dealing with bulls and cows and horses? While there, he or she, the vet, is going to be witnessing all sorts of interactions among the people who work on the farm or the ranch. And think about the situations that people get themselves into. The same domestic motives that occur in big cities, the revenge, the lust, the greed, occur among people in every environment. And now we have someone who is a trained investigator, a methodical analyzer, a scientist, and has a good reason to be out and about in the world. So I think you can see that subgenres just can run the gamut by occupation, like a vet or a doctor or a caterer or an antiques appraiser, or by hobby, like a genealogist who goes to museums and might travel the world to try to find records of births from a cruise ship company that hasn't yet posted them up online. Maybe a gardener who goes to gardening shows or wants to go to the big festivals around the world. The ideas here are limitless, but the two qualities that you need to consider is that probably you don't want a professional detective, but you can certainly have someone who works in a career. So when I say the sleuth is an amateur, I mean an amateur sleuth, not necessarily an amateur person. It doesn't have to be strictly a hobby. It can be a career as long as the person is not being paid to be a detective.